Week 2 is officially here, guys. It is a great day to be alive and to start watching some football games today. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of start-sit questions that we're going to have to go through because people are desperately trying not to start 0-2, and a lot of people are trying to desperately start 2-0. And, of course, you know, the thing in fantasy is the hotter the start you get off on, the better off your team is going to be. But I will also say this. If you end up 0-2 today, not to start the day on a bad note, but don't panic. Don't panic. 0-2 is not a big hole to climb out of, right? 0-2 is definitely a spot where urgency should be at front of mind. But when you're 0-2, you should not be looking at it as, you know, the end of the world, and you shouldn't be looking at it as like you just can't pull out of it, right? 0-2 is not a good place to be in, but it is not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. So we definitely have to keep that stuff in mind as we go through and answer questions today. But we're going to do everything we can to win. So make sure to drop a like on the live stream, subscribe to the channel to show your support, and we will start answering some questions here. A couple things I did see. Quinshon Judkins apparently is going to be limited to like 15 snaps today. Listen, it was never a good idea to start Quinshon Judkins. There's just too many things going on. And at the same time, you're also in a position to where you're going to have to, take into account that this is going to be a blowout. And there's not going to be much running going on from the Browns because they're just in a bad spot. They won't be able to run the ball very much. So that's one thing. You shouldn't start Quinshon Judkins. Dylan Sampson's the best back in that backfield. And additionally, I would say Juwan Jennings I saw is apparently active today. Ricky Pearsall's numbers went down a little bit for me because if Juwan Jennings is there, they have another option, and he's not as good. So just a couple notes for today, but we'll go ahead and answer some questions. So let's start out from Zach Fortier. What's going on? Good to see you in here, Zach. Talk about a true OG. Zach has been with me since before, like 500 subscribers. Zach, good to see you in here. I appreciate the super chat. Week 2, indeed it is. I cannot freaking wait for Week 2 fantasy football. Spencer Goldberg, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Hi, PPR start 2. Pollard, Egbuka, J-Mo, and Jacoby Myers. So Emeka Egbuka is definitely going in my lineup. I have discussed this a bunch this week. Look, when it comes to Emeka Egbuka, he's just in this unique spot right now to where there's clearly a hierarchy still with Mike Evans. Like, he got 8 targets compared to Emeka Egbuka's 6, but Emeka Egbuka was in on 54 snaps compared to Mike's 48, and when you look at the routes run on FS Roundup, Egbuka had 36 routes run compared to Mike's 33. And Egbuka was extraordinarily efficient on the work that he got. And at the same time, Mike is going to be, facing a top lockdown corner this week with Derek Stingley. So Emeka Egbuka has to go into my lineup personally. The other one, we actually had this question on the site this morning. And by the way, this is one of the coolest things that's been added to the site recently. You can actually go to FS Roundup and you can post a poll and get immediate start-sit results for your questions, right? So if I picked Alvin Kamara over Jonathan Taylor, you're going to see live up-to-date numbers. See, 80% people said Jonathan Taylor, 20% people said Alvin Kamara. But you can view all the polls, see exactly where everybody stands on them, and you can post your own poll as well. So this is really cool feature that you can go and just get everybody else's opinion on FS Roundup. It's completely free. So go to FS Roundup. There's a link in the description and in the chat as well to go post polls on FS Roundup. But I did actually see that question involving Pollard and Jacoby Myers because to me, I'm not playing J-Mo. Like, I would play Jacoby over Jameson, and I'd probably play Pollard over Jameson Williams as well. So For me, it's between Jacoby and Pollard, and I'll tell you the reason why I voted for Jacoby Myers in one of the polls is because Jacoby Myers is in this position right now to where Brock Bowers apparently is playing. So he practiced yesterday for the Las Vegas Raiders. They're playing on Monday night, and apparently Brock Bowers is going to go. Now, at the same time, Jacoby Myers is in this position where he's already the wide receiver one. Geno Smith is already a quarterback that can provide legitimate fantasy upside. And at the same time, Tony Pollard, again, I've discussed this all week. Like, it's just not a good matchup. It's just simply not. So I think for me, it's just this weird spot with Jacoby where it's like people know that he's good. See, this is the poll right here. Pollard, Kenneth Walker, Jacoby, or J-Mo. And I voted Jacoby Myers. So, yeah, it's just this weird spot to where it's like people know that he's the wide receiver one, but nobody really gives him enough credit. And with Geno Smith, like, that has to change. Geno Smith increases the upside of Jacoby Myers by a lot. So, yeah, it's got to be Jacoby for me as well as Emeka Egbuka. Appreciate the super chat, especially in a full PPR league. Ryan, what's going on, my fellow Ryan? Appreciate the super chat. What are we drinking today, my man? I'm not sure if I'll be drinking today. I've got my big thing of water right here. It's funny, people always ask me, like, why I carry such a big water jug. In my past life that you guys didn't know, and you would probably never guess by just looking at me, like, I'm not exactly the most in-shape guy these days, but in my past life, I used to actually compete in men's physique bodybuilding, and from there, I drank water. I drank like 2 gallons of water a day, and I've never liked soda, which is good because I'd be even more out of shape, but I'm just always drinking a bunch of water, so that's the reason I've got this big jug with me all the time when I stream. I don't think I'm going to drink anything today, though. I drank last night, so I feel like today I don't really need to drink anything. Usually I'm drinking whiskey, though. Usually that's just my, like, straight whiskey on ice. That's just the way I prefer it. But appreciate you taking interest, and I appreciate the super chat. Rashik Barron, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. And Njoku or Kelsey? Yeah, I think, I discussed this a little bit earlier in the week. People were really worried about David Njoku after the breakdown between him and Harold Fadden last week. Like, if you go to FS Roundup and you look at the Browns in week 1 and look at the tight end production, right? Like, Harold Fadden got 9 targets, 7 catches for 63 yards compared to Njoku's 5 targets for 3 catches and 37 yards. Now, I think what's really important to take into account, again, this is the stuff that matters for pass catching targets in particular, is that snap counts were, very favorable to David Njoku compared to Fannin. Njoku had 64 snaps compared to Harold Fannon's 55. So it's just one of those situations where it's like, even though Harold Fannin outproduced David Njoku, the routes run were also in favor of Njoku as well, 41-32, and the snap count was in Njoku's favor as well. So, like, my thing with tight ends, right, is that I don't overreact to 2 tight end sets and say to myself, like, oh, he's the starting tight end now. Like Isaiah Likely last year, for example, right? Well, the Ravens ran a bunch of 2 tight end sets, and I expect them to do that when Isaiah Likely returns. But at the same time, like, that didn't make Mark Andrews, like, irrelevant last year. I mean, he was for the first little bit, but he turned out to have a great fantasy year. So my point being is that if there's not a clear difference, like in a clear tight end one in an offense, I'm not going to overreact on that player. So, like, people have been fading Njoku all week. I'm not there. Like, I'm not in that position because, again, if you just look at the numbers, Njoku outsnapped Harold Fannin by 9, and he he had 9 more routes run than Harold Fannin. So he's not irrelevant in this passing game whatsoever. Whereas with Travis Kelce, we look over to his team, Kansas City, and it's like, listen, Travis Kelce, yes, 51 snaps, 38 routes run, but the guy can't move anymore. And the only reason he salvaged a week last week because he got a free play, basically. So for me, I'd rather take the upside with a younger guy like Njoku on an offense, additionally, that like it doesn't. They're not that much different than Kansas City as far as the fact that they are desperate for weapons and it's just a better player. So like I'm playing Njoku over Kelce today pretty easily. And it's really just not that much of a question for me. Travis Kelce is just not finding his way to my lineup, bottom line. Appreciate the super chat. Okay, next up we have Jessica Lauren. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Good to see you in here, Jessica. I know you're usually always in here as well. It's always good to see you too. Full PPR. Flex Pearsall, Henderson, or Mason. So this is a really good question, and I've seen a lot of Travion questions as well, and Travion polls in the FS Roundup polls that we put up. So, you know, the thing about it is that Travion last week obviously wasn't what we were expecting, and not even like that. It wasn't what we were hoping whatsoever. Ramondre had 43 plays compared to Travion's 20. But what I will say to that is he was in on 25 snaps, right? And he got 11 opportunities in those 25 snaps. So that's basically almost every other time that he was on the field, he was getting an opportunity with the ball. Like that shows the importance to the offense and just how much they want to get the guy the ball. And Mike Vrabel also talked this week earlier about how he wants to get Travion in space more. And it's like, okay, well, if I put 2 and 2 together, it would appear that Travion probably gets more production this week. Now, this week he plays the Dolphins, so that's a much better matchup than the Raiders turned out to be last week. So I could see a world where Travion has a breakout week this week. With Ricky, I'll be honest, like I'm not really considering Jordan Mason over Travion, so I'm going to rule him out because I would play also Ricky probably over Jordan Mason. And my thing with Ricky is that with Ricky Pearsall, right? So he obviously looks like the wide receiver one, and he's definitely the better wide receiver, I would say, between him and Jawan Jennings. Like, I would agree with that statement. But I will also say this. With Ricky Pearsall, he is in the spot where it's like, I have no idea what the quarterback is going to, want to do. But I did say this earlier in the week. One thing we can't forget is that last year, Brian Thomas Jr. became a clutch league-winning player at the perfect time for teams because Mac Jones was hyper-targeting him. And Mac Jones is the quarterback today. So there's definitely a world where Ricky Pearsall can have a great game today versus the Saints. And I don't think this is going to be as big of a blowout as it could have been if Brock Purdy played. So I think the world where Ricky has good upside is there as well. That being said, it feels really wrong. And maybe it's not, but it feels wrong to me to put a bunch of trust into Mac Jones and say that he's definitely going to increase Ricky Pearsall's upside from where it was last week. So for me personally, I think they're relatively close enough in my rankings to where I would tell you that it's a gut call between Travion and Ricky Pearsall. If you feel strongly about one option or the other, go with your gut. But my gut is telling me, since they're so close in my rankings, that I would rather play Travion because I know that the team wants to get him more involved, and I like the matchup better, and he's also just not dependent on a bad quarterback. Right? I mean, I'm not sure if Drake May is that good, but I will say this, he doesn't need a quarterback to give him the ball out of the backfield and just hand him the ball off. So I just think there's a little less complications at play with Travion. I'm leaning Travion, but I will tell you they're really close to my rankings, so you go with your gut if you don't want to play Travion Henderson. Appreciate the super chat, Jessica. Good to see you in here. Richard Cranium, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Been waiting all week. Best advice around. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I do my best, and I'm nothing without you guys. That's for sure. Full PPR, Breece Hall or Charbonnet? tight end, Kincaid or Ingram, flex Ekbuka or Jacoby Myers. Thanks, man. Cheers. Cheers right back at you. Okay, so Breece Hall or Charbonnet is definitely going to be Charbonnet for me. And I know that's going to be tight for some people, and a lot of people honestly would probably say Breece. And I can understand those people. Look, I mean, Breece Hall was really, really good last week. He was extraordinarily efficient on what his work was, 36 plays compared to Braylon Allen's 19. Outsnapped him basically 2-1, and then 8 plays for Isaiah Davis. And if you look at the efficiency, Breece Hall was incredibly efficient on 19 carries. I mean, I'm not here to argue that. I'm a Breece Hall guy. I like Breece's talent a lot. But the question still remains is this offense any good actually? Or did they just play a bad, soft defense last week? I think it was that. Like, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is so overrated right now, guys. Like, it's been so bizarre, like, ranking my defenses the first 2 weeks and seeing the amount of, like, viciousness around my lack of ranking of Pittsburgh, particularly this week. And I just don't get it. Like, if you watch the Steelers, like, how could you ever say that they looked good last week? Their defense, if you took out TJ Watt, did nothing to stop the Jets offense last week. Nothing. And I think that this is going to be one of those games where the Jets offense definitely gets exposed and they get brought back down to earth because they're playing the Bills. And I've said this throughout the week. Like, when a team plays Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, I'm going to cut that defense slack because those are our top quarterbacks in the league. And it's not close. So, like, I'm going to cut them slack on if they don't play a very good game defensively. Well, the Bills gave up 40 points to Lamar and the Ravens last week. Big deal. Big deal. They played the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. Context is everything. And this week, they just don't have that scenario when they take on Justin Fields, who historically, you just can't ignore that kind of stuff. Like, he's just not that good of a throwing quarterback. And Breece Hall, if there's going to continue to be this snap count limitations with Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, then you just have to factor that in as well. So, given I don't think this offense moves the ball as much this week, I'll take Charbonnet against that same defense that Breece crushed last week. And when I look at Charbonnet's usage on fsroundup.com, again, all free information, by the way, go check out FS Roundup. There is a link in the description and in the chat. Zach Charbonnet, his usage was still split relatively with Kenneth Walker, but at the same time, Charbonnet was definitely the guy on the ground that performed better. So, like, I don't think it's inconceivable whatsoever that Zach Charbonnet sees another week where he's the lead back by carries. And against this defense, I just want in on it. So I'm going to go with Zach Charbonnet over Breece Hall. Now, at the tight end position, Kincaid or Ingram, I would say that with Ingram, obviously, he's going to play today, but he did have an injury that he was sort of limited by in practice. And listen, Ingram was important on like very limited snaps, so it is definitely worthy to note that. 4 targets, 3 catches, 21 yards. And again, he went out pretty early. I mean, Adam Troutman played the majority of snaps. Not because Evan Ingram wasn't good, it was because Evan Ingram was out for a good part of that game against the Titans last week. So definitely keep that in mind when it comes to the importance of Ingram in this offense. I do believe that we continue to see that trend. And then when you look at Kincaid, Dalton Kincaid, I will say this, like, Dawson Knox is always going to be a thorn in Dalton Kincaid's side. It's just going to be the case. He did look better on a per-touch basis last week. Like, 4 targets, 4 catches for 48 yards and a touchdown. It's a good week for a tight end. Now, again, I just got done saying I think the Jets are going to get curb stomped this week. I really do. Like, I truly, truly do believe they will get curb stomped. And for that reason, like, I just can't really trust many pass-catching options for the Buffalo Bills this week because I just don't think they're going to have to throw deep into the fourth quarter like they did last week. So I'm going to go with Ingram here because I think that the game could be a little tighter. While I think the Broncos will win and probably potentially beat the brakes off the Indianapolis Colts, I do think it'll be closer, and the Broncos will have to throw the ball more. So I'll go Ingram, I'll go Charbonnet, and then for the flex, I will easily go with Ekbuka. Again, I just got done complimenting Jacoby Myers this week on I think he will be a good play. But at the same time, man, like when you're dealing with Emeka Egbuka, this is a matchup versus Houston this week that will get sloppy potentially for the offense, and I think that Mike Evans will be bottled by Derek Stingley, a true lockdown corner in the league. So for me, Emeka Egbuka is in this position to where he could easily be the wide receiver 1 in fantasy again this week for Tampa very, very easily. Like, it will not surprise me whatsoever if that happens. So Emeka Egbuka, better quarterback, better upside. I'll take Emeka Egbuka. Appreciate the super chat, Richard Cranium. Michael Merowitz, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Stroud or Penix? I will go with Stroud this week. Yeah, when I was ranking my quarterbacks, last week I had Penix relatively high ranked. Like, compared to where I've ever had him in my rankings, quarterback-wise, Penix had his best ranking day for me last week, and he also had a really good game. But it was against an inferior defense, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This week, he doesn't get that same grace. Like, he has to play Minnesota in Minnesota this week. That's tough. I mean, that's just a really tough matchup, bottom line. Whereas with CJ Stroud, like, he gets to play that same Tampa defense that just got shredded by Michael Penix and that offense a week ago. And I will also say this, like, CJ, people do need to remember that he is a good quarterback. He is. And I think that this team is going to come in very vicious this week because they don't want to start 0-2. It's a Monday night primetime game in Houston. That's a tough place to play. Houston is a really tough place to play. I've seen many games in Houston Stadium because I live in San Antonio. I've seen many games in Houston, and that's a tough place to play. So I think the Bucs are in for a little bit of a rude awakening. I think CJ could have a really good day today. And I would say that CJ is definitely my pick over Penix this week. JMO, KW9, or Tracy at the flex? Yeah, that's a really good question. Listen, Jameson Williams versus the Bears today, in theory, could offer good upside. But I will say this, like, I continue to say this because I haven't been proven wrong yet. I think the Lions need to continue to take time to get acquainted with this new offense because it's different. It's just different. I mean, people fought me on this so much last week, and not just last week, all offseason. And I don't know how it was, like, controversial. When you lose an offensive coordinator like Ben Johnson, things will change, and that offense won't be the same. Like, I don't know why that was controversial. That offensive coordinator, John Morton, is a first-time offensive coordinator at 50 years old. That's not a good sign. Look across the league. That doesn't work usually. First-time coordinators in their 50s, not a good sign. So even though Jameson Williams was involved and was in on a lot of snaps, like, it just wasn't working last week. And I think it's going to take time before it works again. So I'm not going to play JMO this week. And I get it. Your running back options aren't great. But what we do know about Tyrone Tracy particularly is we know the workload is there. When you look at Tyrone Tracy and the running back usage on FS Roundup, he was in on 50 plays compared to Singletary's 10 and Cam Scadaboo's 8. And he wasn't efficient last week. I get it. I totally get it. But he had more targets than Cam Scadaboo. And Cam Scadaboo didn't look good on his work last week. So, like, I don't see a world where the New York Giants are like, yeah, that's our problem right there. Like, we need to give more opportunities to Cam Scadaboo. No, that's not the problem. Like, you just need to give – they're going to continue to give Tracy the ball. And this week it's a better matchup in theory. And Kenneth, like, as much as I would like to play Kenneth against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense, we just can't do that because we know what the usage was last week for Seattle versus the San Francisco 49ers. It's just not a winning formula for a running back in fantasy football. But the winning formula would definitely be for Tyrone Tracy because Tracy is clearly the running back 1 in New York. So when it comes to, like, options like this, right, and the options that you have are not particularly super high upside, I want to ensure that I get the volume. And I'm ensuring I get the volume with Tyrone Tracy. So I'll go with Tracy this week. 1 running back, 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. Hampton, Etienne, Drake London, Egbuka, Evans, Sutton, Breece. My running back is going to be Travis Etienne out of that bunch. Travis Etienne has the green light in Jacksonville right now, and they get to play the Bengals this week. It's going to be good. It's going to be a good cruising matchup. Not that they're going to cruise to victory, but they will be able to move the ball against the Bengals defense. And Travis Etienne last week with Tank Bixby was clearly the lead back. 40 snaps compared to Tank's 14. And Bashal Tootin, 4 snaps last week. I mean, realistically, like if they had that much trust in Bashal Tootin, they would have given him more snaps than 4. So, like, just because Tank is gone doesn't mean that Bashal Tootin's going to all of a sudden take work. LaQuint Allen may be the bigger threat. I mean, honestly, he might be. So I would definitely go with Travis Etienne in this spot right here as the running back. Your wide receivers, Drake London definitely has to go in. And I would also say that Emeka Egbuka needs to go in as well. Now, that being said, like I get the concern that some would have is that if we put Emeka Egbuka and Mike Evans both in the lineup and they both don't do well, it's going to tank your team this week. And you always run that risk when you play 2 players on the same team. But I would say to that, the thing I would say to that is when the matchup is like it is versus Houston and you have Mike Evans taking on Derek Stingley, I would agree with that statement more often than usual. Because if Tampa was playing the Carolina Panthers, like I wouldn't worry about putting Egbuka and Mike Evans both out there at the same time. I really wouldn't. But given the fact that it's Houston, I think there's a greater than 40% chance that Mike Evans has a bad day in fantasy tomorrow night. So for that reason, I would go with Egbuka and I would go with Sutton over Mike Evans because I think that Courtland Sutton, the thing about him is that he's always going to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense, and he's always a touchdown threat. Like, he's their volume guy, and he's also their red zone guy. So, with Sutton, like, I think there's too much there every week with him to usually put him on your bench. And I think Sutton is definitely going to be the guy that I would pick as my flex. So, my running back out of that group would be Etienne. I would go Drake London and Emeka Egbuka as my wide receivers, and then I would put Sutton in that flex. Well, I would actually put Egbuka in the flex technically because he's a Monday night game, and that'll give you time to decide between him and Mike. Keep the Eagles defense or stream the 49ers or Arizona. Well, listen, I'm a big streaming defense guy. Like, I do not hold on to defenses, and this is something that, like, since I go through defense, and I'm thought of as the defense guy in the fantasy community, I go through defense once a week, and people always assume when I do my preseason rankings for defense that means that like they're always going to be good every week, and that you should hold on to them every single week. I don't believe that. Like, I've never played fantasy that way. I always interchange defenses on a weekly basis. Now, one of the reasons I'm able to do that is because nobody in my leagues that I play hoards defense. Actually, in one of my dynasty leagues, people do hoard defenses, which I find weird. But at the same time, like, there's always going to be opportunistic matchups on the waiver wire from a defensive perspective. So I don't usually ever get, like, scared away from dropping a defense unless that schedule is so good moving forward. And I think when you look at the Eagles' schedule, like, they've got a lot of tough matchups coming up, if I remember correctly. So the Eagles, after this week, they play the Rams, then they play the Bucs, then they play the Broncos, then they play the Giants. So, like, in theory, the Eagles don't have a good defensive matchup until the Giants on October 9th, which I think is a Thursday night game. So, yeah, like, I just don't think that the Eagles are in this position to where you're obligated to keep them. Like, I just don't. And I think the Chiefs are going to put up a good fight this week. So, for me, personally, it's definitely going to be a situation where I'm fine dropping them. And if I did, I would definitely drop them for the Arizona Cardinals. Appreciate the super chat. Okay, next up we had Wyatt Agualo. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Flex 1, Hollywood, Judy, Dobbins, Pittman, or Quentin Johnston. Yeah, I think, obviously we're in this spot where, like, Quentin Johnston's coming off the big week. There's definitely incentive to play him this week, given the upside we had last week. Pittman, same deal. Incentive to play him, but he's playing, again, matchup matters. And he's playing Pat Surtain, the guy who shut down Calvin Ridley, who I think is a better wide receiver than Michael Pittman. So I'm not playing Pittman over Quentin Johnston, for example. I played Johnston over Pittman. So we're able to rule Pittman out. Now, Dobbins is someone that I would probably play over Quentin Johnston as well. Okay, we're getting some spammers in here, which is never good. I think we're getting them taken care of, which is good. Okay, thank you for taking care of those spammers, Carly. Dobbins, yeah, I would play Johnston over, I would play Dobbins over Johnston, because again, I think the matchup, and considering the RB usage, if you look at FS Roundup, like the usage definitely favors JK, and I think it will favor him for a good chunk of the early part of the season. One of the things that Denver loves, and most teams love this, it's not just Denver and Sean Payton, most teams love a pass blocking running back, and J.K. Dobbins can block the rush. Like he definitely can, and most rookie running backs aren't as good at doing that as veteran backs. So for me, J.K. Dobbins is a good play versus the Colts defense, who I think looked better than they really are last week. And so I played Dobbins over Quentin Johnston. So we've ruled out Pittman and Quentin Johnston. Jerry Jeudy this week definitely has upside. And I would say that in a matchup where they're going to get crushed and they're going to have to throw the ball a ton this week, it makes sense to play him. But I will say that we are in the spot where, the usage in Cleveland with the wide receivers was like identical last week. You look at Cleveland's wide receiver production on FS Roundup, and it was exactly the same. Like both Tillman and Jeudy were in on 67 snaps. They both had 8 targets. They both had 5 catches. Jeudy had more yards, but Tillman got in the end zone. And then we look at the routes run, exactly the same, 46. So they're both on the field at the same time always. And it doesn't look like that Flacco had a favorite based on week 1. So, yeah, I think for me, it's like I'd play Dobbins over Jeudy just because of the uncertainty with how bad this matchup is. And also because J.K. Dobbins, I think, is just in a better spot on a better offense. But I would play Hollywood over Dobbins. That's what I would do. Because here's the thing, guys. I've been trashing Kelsey for a long time now. I'm not foreign to that idea. I think Travis Kelce's a 40-year-old pop star at this point, who isn't that good at football anymore. Not debating that he's a Hall of Fame player. He definitely is. First ballot Hall of Famer, best tight end I've ever seen. Actually, I might put Gronk above him. I don't know. We'll decide that later. But Hollywood Brown, the 14 targets that he got last week, 10 targets is so. I think it's honestly a near lock. 10 targets for Hollywood Brown, I think is a near lock. Because I just don't see the Chiefs running the ball. If you looked at last week and the uses that they had with the running backs, each running back between Pacheco and Hunt had 5 carries. That's 10 carries between the two. And it's weird because they actually had some success running the ball, but they just didn't want to. And I get it. They were down for a good part of that game, so they had to catch up. Well, the Eagles are not going to be an easy outing either. So Hollywood, the potential that he gets 10 targets, again, I think it's not even just potential. I think it's a lock. Honestly, I truly, truly believe it's a lock. So, yeah, I would easily go with Hollywood Brown as my starter out of that group, Wyatt. Appreciate the super chat, Wyatt. Rachel Cruz, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Need a running back 2 and a flex. Tyrone Tracy, Zach Charbonnet, Travion Henderson, Jalen Warren, Marvin Harrison. So your running back 2 is between Tracy, Charbonnet, and Travion, and Jalen Warren. So I would play Tracy over Warren, so I'll take Warren out of the equation. I would play Travion over Tracy. So I'll take Tracy out of the equation. It's between Tracy and Charbonnet. And again, the usage for both of those backs is definitely up for debate heading into this week, because the usage for Charbonnet, while it looked better last week than Kenneth Walker, we never know realistically. What we do know is that it's a good matchup versus the Pittsburgh Steelers' terrible run defense. That's just atrocious if you want to know the truth. And then when you look at with Travion's matchup, it's also a great matchup versus Miami's Swiss cheese defense too. Now, the problem with Travion, again, is that he only had 20 plays last week. Again, I think that number goes up. I really do. It's really funny because earlier in the week, when I did my running back rankings on Wednesday, I actually was lower on Travion than I am now. I'm actually bigger on Travion as the week has gone along, just because that matchup is so good. And listen, I just think that when you listen to Mike Vrabel this week talking about how they need to get him into space, it shows to me they have initiative to continue to use him. So yeah, I think for me, it's a clear Travion Henderson, just based on I wouldn't say it's clear. It's not. They're actually really, really close to my rankings. So gut call time, but I think the reason I'd say Travion pretty clearly is because most people don't sit where I sit this week on Charbonnet. Most people don't have him ranked as high as I do. So definitely for me, it's closer call, but I would end up going with Travion. But I also will acknowledge that Travion is in a position to where he could see that same usage again this week, because this coaching staff just is an older mentality coaching staff that doesn't want to give the rookie a bunch of work immediately right off the bat. So they both have great matchups. They're both in split backfields. I'll go with the talent that I believe in more, which is Travion. Appreciate the super chat. You need to flex as well. Marvin is my flex. I would play Marvin over Zach Charbonnet because, listen, I started out the week really not big on Marvin. I watched the game on I watched his Arizona game late, or during the day on Monday. And when I watched the game, I wasn't coming away super impressed. And then I gave myself a day and I watched Marvin's every target he had on Tuesday, and I was like, okay, no, they actually did use him more like a true number one. I came away a lot more impressed watching it the second time around than I did the first time. So Marvin, to me, it was an improvement off how they used him last year. And for that reason, I would say I have more trust in Marvin this year than I did last year. So I'll go with Marvin, and I will go with Travion Henderson. Appreciate the super chat, Rachel Cruz. Good to see you in here, too. I know you're always in here. Red Evil 701, good to see you. Appreciate the super chat. James Cook or Kyron Williams, and Joe Burrow or Jalen Hurts. So I'll go with I'll go with Hurts over Burrow because I still think that the Bengals need more time. And I get it. The matchup theoretically is juicy. And there is a world where Burrow has a really good day in fantasy. I'm not debating that. But I will say that history is history, and I was proven right once again last week with saying that I would bench Burrow, and a lot of times I would bench T. Higgins. I mean, it's just how it goes in the month of September for the Bengals, particularly in the first 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks, they're now 2-9 in the first 2 weeks under Zach Taylor. So if that doesn't indicate to you that this team historically starts slow, I don't know what will. And history matters. It does. So, yeah, I think Burrow, I'm putting him on my bench this week because it's not like you're asking me Burrow or Michael Penix, right? If you were asking me Burrow or Michael Penix, I would go with Burrow. It's not like you're asking me Burrow or Drake May. I would go with Burrow. You're asking me Burrow or Jalen Hurts, another elite quarterback in fantasy who doesn't start slow, has the rushing upside, and is in a competitive matchup today as well. So I'll take Hurts pretty easily over Burrow. Cook or Kyron Williams. It's really interesting. I think Kyron is a really good play this week And again, if you have questions, guys, like if you have questions and I'm not able to answer it, for example, or you just want a bigger opinion of what you think, you can go to FS Roundup and create a poll. You see these polls running through right now? Those are real people that are asking these questions. You're able to give a start, sit, answer. Like, it's pretty sweet, the technology that we were able to add to this site. So go utilize it, because you will get real-time answers from people. Now, having said all that, like, I think that Cook and Kyren are really close to my rankings this week. You know, the one thing with Cook this week is that I've been saying it for a lot of the week. I think the Jets are going to lose pretty bad this week. And listen, there's no question that there definitely is a limitation that Buffalo gives James Cook on a weekly basis. Like, you can't argue that. It's a real thing. So, on one hand, I'm like, yeah, I don't love the usage that James Cook sees on a weekly basis. I mean, he had 13 rushing attempts and 5 targets last week in a matchup where they scored 40-plus points. But at the same time, like, this is very similar to the Kyren situation, where James Cook is pretty consistently getting in the end zone once a week. Like, we have last year to prove that, and at the start of this year as well. So, yeah, to me, I think it's the match, since they're both very similar plays, and they're both, I would say, similar talents, because I don't think Kyren gets the respect he deserves either. I like the matchup better that Buffalo has compared to the matchup that the Rams have, which is Tennessee. I'm not arguing that they're going to lose. But what I am saying is that Tennessee has a really strong front seven. They're really close. Honestly, like, I'm trying to talk my way through it and convince myself to definitely go with James Cook, but I'm not there. Like, honestly, I'm not there. This is, again, one of those perfect polls to put up on FS Roundup. Put up this poll, see what people think. And also, again, when players are this close to my rankings, my advice is always going to be go with your gut. Because my gut is leaning Cook. But I can't, like, you just watch me try to process all that information in my head. And I can't confidently say that Cook is going to be the guy that I would do on my own team. I might come down to it and my gut may change right before kickoff. And I might swing with Kyren Williams. Like, it's either way for me. So go with your gut. Go with your gut on this one. My gut is leaning right now James Cook, and my rankings would clarify that. But go with your gut. I'll go with Cook, and I will go with Jalen Hurts. Appreciate the super chat. Good to see you in here, Red Evil. Eric Muniz, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Need a kicker. Should I start Schrader or Ryland? I'd go with Chad Ryland this week. I get it. Spencer Schrader last week was kicker number 1. They played the Miami Dolphins, big whoop, right? Like, Indianapolis, it doesn't matter if it was Indianapolis, even Carolina. Like, Carolina would have beaten the brakes off of Miami last week. Miami's a team that looks finished. Bottom line, end of story. They just look like they don't care. And that's one of the most concerning things that you could have from an NFL team in week 1 is, like, they look like they just don't give a bleep, right? Like, they just don't look like they care at all. So, you know, having said that, it's like this week their matchup is nowhere near as opportunistic. They play the Broncos. I mean, that's just a much more difficult matchup for him to be able to go through. And again, kickers are all about matchups and offensive efficiency. And I think that, like, if you just take a step back and think about the quarterback that we know Daniel Jones to be, do we really think that he's going to play well against the Denver Broncos defense today? And I think if most people just kind of sat back and considered that, they would agree that, like, there's no way that Daniel Jones is going to look good against the Broncos defense today. There's just no way. So, yeah, I would go with Chad Ryland because the matchup versus Carolina is pretty sweet. Appreciate the super chat. Bisco, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. K9 or Sharbs? Also have Judkins, RJ, Ollie, and Caleb. Well, you're definitely going to go with with one of the Seattle backs over the rest of the options. I just can't get on board with playing any of them. The one that comes closest is definitely RJ Harvey. There's not a chance in hell that I would play Caleb Johnson. Like, there's just no chance. The one that definitely comes closest to cracking the lineup is RJ Harvey, but even still, I wouldn't do it over the two Seattle backs. The two Seattle backs have the matchup this week, and they have, I think, just the better running game. Not necessarily better than Denver. I think Denver has the better running game, but again, it's a matchup thing. Like, I think Denver has a sneaky tough matchup this week. Or not a sneaky tough matchup, I'm sorry. But either way, I'm going with one of these Seattle backs. And when it comes to the Seattle backs, Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet. Again, if you watch my running back rankings this week, Zach Charbonnet was well above consensus. Like, I will say, like, I came away last week with that production in Seattle thinking that Kenneth Walker was not the back that you wanted right now. It was Zach Charbonnet. Because all we heard all offseason from Clint Kubiak was, we're definitely going to give, Kenneth Walker tons of touches. And I was all on board with that idea. But that was rug pulled in a big way last week. So I just think that Zach Charbonnet, when you look at the efficiency between the two and you look at particularly the short yardage usage and the goal line usage, Zach Charbonnet dominated at the goal line, 3 carries on 3 plays on the goal line. Like, he was in on the short yardage situations, and a lot of times that's what it takes. So in this matchup this week, I'm going to go with Zach Charbonnet because we're just in this weird spot with Kenneth where I get it, he's the pass-catching running back. And again, if you look at all this information is free on FS Roundup. Zach Charbonnet was not the early down back, but he was the goal line back, and he was in on more plays than Charbonnet. He was in on more plays than Kenneth Walker. I just think for me, like, he moved down a little bit after my initial running back rankings video, but he's still above Kenneth Walker. So I would go with Charbonnet. Appreciate the super chat. Michael Merowitz back again. Appreciate the super chat. Other league, Evans or Pearsall? It's pretty easy, Mike Evans. Yeah, with Mike, he's got the quarterback that I know loves to throw to him. And even though the matchup is tough this week, and that's really the only reason I think you might be asking the question, because I think most times people would not ask me Mike Evans or Ricky. I mean, if we see a Ricky breakout this year, that's a different story. But, like, we're not sure of that yet. And particularly this week with Mac Jones, it's just so hit or miss. Because, like, Mac Jones could hyper-target Ricky Pearsall today, and it would not shock me. But at the same time, he's not that good, I don't think. And if he doesn't hyper-target him, it wouldn't shock me either. If he hyper-targets Juwan Jennings, it wouldn't shock me, honestly. But Ricky Pearsall is definitely the better player than Jennings and has more upside than him. But at the same time, again, even though the matchup I don't love for for Mike Evans versus Derek Stingley this week, to me, it's just like one of those no-brainers where I'm like, I have to play Mike, the better receiver with the better quarterback. Appreciate the super chat. Okay, let's go down. Terrence Holmes, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Juwan Johnson or Devontae Adams, Cedric Tillman or Juju Smith? So Juwan Johnson or Devontae, that's actually a really interesting question. Most people would obviously say Devontae Adams. You asking me this question shows me that you're an outside-the-box thinker, and I like that. I like that a lot. I think that you might be thinking too much outside the box, though, because while Devontae wasn't great last week in fantasy, if you just look at the usage in Los Angeles last week, Devontae was in on more snaps than Puka only because Puka missed some plays, and I think he missed like a full series because he was getting checked for a concussion. But Devontae was involved plenty. 8 targets, 4 catches, 50 yards. So it's not a huge fantasy day. But Devontae, I still believe in being the better player. Now, versus the Titans this week again, I think it's a matchup that could shut down Kyron and force the team to throw the ball even more than they like to do. So I think for me, when you just factor in the offensive upside, you got to go with the Rams player, Davante Adams, over somebody like Juwan Johnson, who I'm not debating is definitely going to be important on a weekly basis, but at the same time, like, the San Francisco matchup is not ideal. It's really not. So I think for me, it's got to be Juwan Johnson. Yeah, it's tough, man. It's really, really tough. So I would go with Davante Adams, and then Cedric Tillman or Juju Smith-Schuster. Again, I like the outside the box thinking. I do. Because Juju, again, is a guy that nobody was talking about this week except me. And you have to factor him in. I mean, he's going to get work. Like, he will get work today, no doubt. Now, I just don't think he's good enough of a player to really execute on more than what he did last week. 5 targets, 5 catches, 55 yards. Like, that feels like a Juju stat line again today. So, upside is limited. Whereas with Cedric Tillman, this team is going to throw the ball a ton today. And again, I mean, everything was identical between him and Jerry Jeudy last week. From the work that they got to the amount of opportunities that they theoretically would have based on snap count percentage and routes run. So I'm not convinced that Joe Flacco's number one wide receiver is Jerry Jeudy. And quarterback factors in a lot to who they prefer. So, yeah, I think to me it's definitely a Cedric Tillman play over Juju because the team's just going to be forced to throw the ball a ton. They're going to be forced to throw a ton. And I think Kansas City will as well, but Hollywood will definitely dominate the target share because Juju just isn't that good of a player. I'd go with Tillman, and I would go with Davante. Appreciate the super chat. Bisco, back again. Appreciate the super chat. Pick 2 wide receivers. Evans, J-Mo, Tillman, Shakir, Waddle, and DK. Well, this is a pretty easy answer for me, to be honest with you. Again, you put Mike Evans in because the teardrop between him and the rest of those guys is so severe that there's no way I would not pick Mike Evans. There's just no way. So Mike Evans, just from a tier break perspective, like in my rankings, he's just way too high above all these guys. I would put Evans in there for sure. And I would easily put DK in there. Listen, DK Metcalf is going to – I really do think DK could go nuclear this week. I really do. And, coming from a Steelers fan who was not big on the offense all offseason, I came away like feeling more excited about watching a Steelers game than I have since Ben retired. Like, Aaron Rodgers is a legitimate quarterback, unlike the Steelers have had since Ben. And DK, while he was outproduced in fantasy last week because of Calvin Austin's touchdown, was definitely the more effective receiver on a per-touch basis. Like, DK Metcalf had several plays. Like, if you click on DK Metcalf on FF's Roundup, look at the receiving yards after the catch. 68 receiving yards after the catch. That was 4th in the league last week. DK was all over the place last week. So I think they're going to hyper-target DK this week because it's a revenge game. It's a revenge game versus the Seattle Seahawks. I think that DK is going to be really involved today. So I'll go with DK and I'll go with Mike Evans. Appreciate the super chat. Izzy Drizzy 9, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Jaylen Warren or Quentin Johnston in the flex? It's funny. Like, I should be answering this question a lot easier just based on my own rankings. My own rankings would say Jaylen Warren is the better play. And I stand by the rankings. This is the thing about fantasy, right? Things change on a daily, not just a daily basis. Things can change on an hourly basis in fantasy. And the thing is, like, when I look at the usage in the running back room for Pittsburgh last week, Kenneth Gainwell was in on 28 plays compared to Jalen's 24. Now, I'm not here to say that Kenneth is the running back that you want in Pittsburgh. Like, he definitely was in on, Warren was definitely in on more, opportunistic plays, I would say. Like, he ran the ball more than Kenneth Gainwell did. He had 11 carries compared to Kenneth Gainwell's 7. He was more effective on the ground. He got in the end zone. So, like, he's definitely the player that you want in Pittsburgh's backfield. Having said that, like, a Pittsburgh back just doesn't offer much upside because their offensive line sucks, number one. And number two is that they're going to throw the ball a lot with Aaron Rodgers. Like, that's just a fact as well. So my mind is telling me Quentin Johnston because of the fact that, like, just based on what we saw last week, like, the Chargers threw the ball so well. And Quentin Johnston, the amount of routes and snaps that he was the wide receiver 2 easily in this offense. He had 53 snaps compared to Keenan's 40, and the routes run, he only ran 2 less routes than Ladd McConkey. So, like, Quentin Johnston from every metric, and if you just watch the game, like, because for me, like, always watching the game is going to be a better indication than looking at numbers. You have to watch the games to get good analysis. And watching the game, Quentin Johnston literally looked like, I was like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Like, all we've known from Quentin Johnston throughout his career is disappointment so far. He looked like a legitimate breakout wide receiver last week. So my gut and my mind my heart is telling me Quentin Johnston, but my mind is saying Jaylen Warren based off my rankings. But I'm a gut player, and I always tell you guys to go with your gut. And my gut's telling me Quentin Johnston. I'm going to throw out my rankings on this one, and I'm going to go with Quentin Johnston. Appreciate the super chat. Okay, next we had Junk Buster. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Metcalf or Egbuka, Kenneth Walker or Jordan Mason, full PPR. So I just got through glazing DK Metcalf, basically. I really did. And while I do think DK is going to be a great play, my rankings are still intact, and my feeling is still intact on this one. I would easily go with Emeka Egbuka. Listen, like, there's a couple things that, like, worry me about DK Metcalf, and I included him in a sell high video a couple times this week, and people have asked me this week, like, do I buy DK this week? And my response has always been, hey, listen, like, when we're talking about, like, split, like, if we're talking about DK Metcalf for Courtland Sutton, right? Well, we have to split hairs here because I think their upside is relatively similar. Now, where we have to split hairs is because, like, they're so similar upside-wise, and so you have to split hairs. And when I do split hairs, one of the things I can't get out of my mind after watching the Steelers last week is their offensive line was so atrocious. And what that leads me to believe is that Aaron Rodgers won't play a full season. I hope I'm wrong. I really, really do. I hope I'm wrong on this one. But I can't envision it. I can't envision Aaron Rodgers playing all 17 games this year because he got smoked last week. And that's going to happen. Even this week, like, they play the Seahawks front seven. That's a recipe for disaster for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the same thing has to be applied for a weekly start-sit matchup. Because I love DK's upside this week, but I also love Egbuka's. And Egbuka, the thing with him is that I have less concerns with Emeka Egbuka than I do with DK. Like, I have way more concerns with DK Metcalf because of quarterback than I do with Emeka Egbuka. Egbuka has a solid offensive line protecting Baker. And Baker is not that far off of a quarterback than Aaron Rodgers is. And additionally, Mike Evans is someone that I've discussed all week being a legitimate threat to busting because of Derek Stingley's matchup on him. So Egbuka gets opportunities opened up for him as the wide receiver too. So as much as I like DK this week, I'll play Egbuka. And Kenneth or Jordan Mason, easy Jordan Mason to me. Jordan Mason dominated the carries last week 2-1 on Aaron Jones. He is going to continue to do that, and they're playing the Falcons this week. Like, I want that matchup all day long. And Kenneth, we just don't know what the split will look like this week. So I'll go Jordan Mason. Appreciate the super chat. Eric Muniz, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Rest of season, should I stream a kicker or try to keep one that's available? Other than Ryland and Schrader, there's Sly, McManus, and McPherson. Love the content. Well, appreciate that. Listen, this is the same thing. I just answered a question probably 20 minutes ago at this point about defenses and my desire to stream defenses. And I've always been this way. Like, even though people just get this confused. Like, when I rank my defenses before the season starts, top 12 defenses for fantasy in any particular year, I rank them based on how they finish end of season. And what that doesn't include is bad matchups. Now, the thing with defense is that, like, defenses are they're easily fluctuatable. I don't even know if that's a word, but they can fluctuate so easily because of matchup. And the same thing applies to kickers. Like, one week, like last week, for example, right? Schrader was awesome. And it was because they played Miami. Well, this week they played Denver. Denver's tough. And I don't expect Schrader to get more than half of the production that he did last week. Whereas with Ryland this week, I think Ryland has a great matchup versus the Carolina Panthers. So my answer always and every time is going to be stream kickers unless you have one of the top 3 kickers. If you have Brandon Aubrey, if you have Chris Boswell, if you have Kaimi Fairbairn, those are guys that you can just play them all year. You don't have to pick up kickers all the time. You can play them all year. But with your options, like there's just no need to hold on to a kicker for an entire season. Like, you can easily stream kickers. And this week, for example, I would play Ryland. Ryland is definitely the guy I would play. Obviously, McManus already played. But, kickers, like, again, you just don't want to you don't want to hold on to kickers for dear life like you would with a wide receiver. Unless you have one of those top options. Because the top options are true game changers. But a lot of these other guys, they're on offenses that are will fluctuate based on matchup. Appreciate the super chat. Nicodemus, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Kicker question. I'm all in for this. Fairbairn or Little? They're both great. They're both fantastic plays this week. I love both those guys. And in fact, I think they're back-to-back my rankings. The thing with Cam Little today is that he's in a great matchup. Like, these high-scoring options, these high-scoring matchups are just matchups you want to put options in fantasy. And the bottom line is that Cam Little is in this position to where they're playing the Cincinnati Bengals defense. And based on the way Jacksonville's offense looked last week, it looked functional enough to be able to put up 30 points today. I'm not saying they will put up 30, but I'm saying they can. And with Fairbairn, like, this offense realistically is so great for a kicker because they're good enough to get you down there consistently, and Fairbairn's a really good kicker. But at the same time, like, with matchups like this, if Cam Little and the Jags, if they were playing the Denver Broncos, if they were playing the Tennessee Titans even, who I think have a good defense, if they were playing one of those teams, I would play Fairbairn easily. Fairbairn is most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, I would play Fairbairn over Little. But this week is that 10%. I would play Cam Little because of the matchup. Appreciate the super chat. Again, guys, if I don't have time to answer your question, I'm going to go as fast as I can over the next 9 minutes or so. But if I don't have time to answer your question, go to fsroundup.com. It is totally free to put up a poll on our site right here. And you can get live results from people who are answering your polls. And you can vote on others as well. Totally free to do this. So just go to FS Roundup, create a poll, and you can answer start-sit questions for others and ask them yourself. Super, super cool feature. And additionally, all the stats that we're going through, those are also free as well and super helpful and digestible. Terrence Holmes, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Good to see you again. Kenneth Walker or Kenneth Gainwell? Yeah, I know I just went through the usage of Kenneth Gainwell last week, but I got to go with Kenneth Walker. I mean, Kenneth Walker, like, the thing with the Steelers is that, yes, even though, like, Kenneth Gainwell's usage was greater than most people expected last week, it still didn't amount to much for fantasy because, number one, he's not, like, a true running back that is going to handle a bunch of work consistently. And number two, like, the Steelers just don't have a good run game because their offensive line blows. Now, the Seahawks offensive line, I think they blow as well, but they just have a better matchup. Like, Pittsburgh's front seven on defense is just easier to take advantage of than Seattle's. So, yeah, I'd easily play Kenneth Walker. Appreciate the super chat. Jordan Eversole, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. $100 full PPR IDP league. Start DK Metcalf or Ted. Kenneth Walker or Landry, and Aiden Hutchinson or Harold Landry. Let me know, brother. Love the content. Well, I appreciate that. Given that we have like 5 minutes, I'm going to try to speed race through the rest of these super chats. So I don't mean to cut anybody's answer short because people who are in the live streams, they know I like to give long answers to give full breakdowns on this. But I would play DK over Tet. I would play DK over Tet because of the revenge game narrative I love. And look, I mean, the reality is, like, when you have a quarterback like Bryce Young, your upside just isn't that high. And I like Tet. I really do, but I just don't see that upside being super, super bad. Or super, super high, rather. So I'd go DK. Kenneth or Tracy, I would go with Tracy because I know the usage is there for Tracy. And when I'm looking at running backs in a split backfield with bad offensive lines, I want to know that the other option will give me confirmed work. And I know I'm going to get that with Tyrone Tracy. While they don't have a good offense, at least I know I'm getting the work, and he's going to be the full-time back. Aiden Hutchinson or Harold Landry, I would personally go with Hutchinson this week. I think the one thing about Chicago is that you play Chicago, and a lot of people last year, I will say this, and try not to go on a tangent, because, again, we're short on time, but one of the things about Chicago is that last year they got a lot of flack for a bad offensive line. And I agree, it was bad. But I will say this, all of last offseason I was saying, people need to understand that Caleb Williams needs to take responsibility for sacks that he took last year. And it was met with outrage. People were like, how could you say that? The Bears' offensive line is terrible. The Bears' offensive coach, Ben Johnson, came in this offseason, made vast improvements to that offensive line, and Caleb Williams was still getting sacked and beaten to a pulp last week. Why is that? Because Caleb holds on to the ball for freaking ever. Aiden Hutchinson is definitely a play this week because you get that sack upside. Appreciate the super chat. Ed, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. You're my tiebreaker, LOL. Flowers, Sutton, or ETN? PPR. Ooh, that's close. Full PPR, I'd go with Travis Etienne. Super, super close. Trust your gut situation because particularly Sutton and Etienne are really close to my rankings this week. I would go with Etienne because of the matchup. Appreciate the super chat. Blitzen Spirits NFL. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Thanks for always showing up. Hey, I appreciate that. That's pretty nice. I appreciate you always being in here, and I appreciate the loyalty very much. Nate Dogg, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Appreciate the super chat. Devonta Smith or Rome? I would go with Devonta because of the matchup upside. Because Kansas City is going to shut down the run, I think, a little bit better this week. I think Philly's going to have to throw the ball more. But they're really close. Again, gut call if you don't like the Devonta Smith call, but I will say I'd go with Devonta Smith. Appreciate the super chat. Tyler Sperry, appreciate the super chat. What's going on? Mike Evans or Devonta Smith? Juwan Johnson or Ingram? I would go with Mike Easy over Devonta Smith, and I would go with Juwan Johnson over Evan Ingram. Appreciate the super chat. Julian Sanchez, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Start 3 for PPR. Devontae London, Evans Chuba, and for another PPR league, need 1 flex. Hampton, J-Mo, Shakir, or Ridley. So start 3, the first part of it, I'd go with Drake London, I'd go with Mike Evans, and I'd go with Chuba Hubbard. Another PPR league, you need 1 flex. Hampton, J-Mo, Shakir, or Ridley. I would go with Amari and Hampton. Appreciate the super chat. Dr. Boom, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Start 2. Zay Hollywood, Pearsall, and Pickens. I'd go with Hollywood, and I would go with Ricky over Zay. And that sounds weird to say because most of the time I would pick Zay over Ricky, but I will this week, since the Ravens will crush the Browns and not need much from the passing game late, I'll go with Hollywood and I'll go with Ricky. Appreciate the super chat. Keith Tapp, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Pick 1 to start. PPR double flex. Ridley, Mason, Butte, Keon Coleman. I'll go with Ridley this week over Keon Coleman. I just hate that match. Like, not the matchup. I don't hate it. It's just they're going to score so many points. Or they're not going to need to score. They're not going to need to throw the ball that much late. I'll go with Ridley. Appreciate the super chat. Cooler Hand, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Pearsall or Hampton PPR, thanks. I'll go with Hampton. So close, though. I'll go with Hampton over Ricky Pearsall just because of the Mac Jones effect. Appreciate the super chat. Andrew H., what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Start 2. PPR, Calvin Ridley, Javonte, Travis Etienne, or Aaron Jones. I'll go Travis Etienne for sure as 1, and I will go with Calvin as my other. Appreciate the super chat. Blitz and Spirits at FFL. Appreciate the super chat. Monty or Bucky, and Jameson, Hollywood, or Coleman. I'll go with Bucky easily over David Montgomery, and J-Mo, Hollywood, or Coleman. I'll go with Hollywood because of the target share that he's going to get. So Hollywood and Bucky. Appreciate the super chat. All right, guys, we're at noon Central Time. Go enjoy you some football today. Like the video, subscribe to the channel on your way out. And again, go post, if it did not answer your question, go post your poll on fsroundup.com. There's a link in the description. There's a link in the chat. You can go post a poll and have your questions answered by other people in real time and also respond to other people's polls as well. Love you guys. Let's enjoy some football today. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.